Let me now bring in cybersecurity expert and CEO of ThreatLocker, Danny Jenkins. Danny, good morning to you. As Brooke was just laying out there, Iran-backed hackers have already claimed responsibility for targeting U.S. aviation firms, banks, oil companies. We haven't seen widespread disruption yet, but is this just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what we could see from Iran?
Absolutely. I think we expect to see a big increase of cyber attacks. And what's the biggest fear with attacks from Iran is rather than being ransomware where they're demanding money to get systems back and running, they're often using things like DDoS attacks or wiper malware to actually completely erase systems, making them unrecoverable.
And the ceasefire currently in place is extremely fragile. You know, we have no idea how long it's going to hold if the escalation were to reach new heights. If things do get even more out of hand, what's worst case scenario when it comes to cyber attacks?
So I think the interesting thing about cyber attacks is they seem to run independent of physical attacks. So we see the same with disagreements with Russia. If there's a physical attack or not, Russia is constantly attacking U.S. entities. And we're seeing the same with Iran. And so I don't know if it's going to increase or decrease it. I think cyber attacks are Iran's way of attacking the U.S. without being held accountable.
Okay, that's good to know. I was thinking that it may be consummate to what we're seeing actually on the ground. Interesting take there. Okay, so America is so military dominant, right? How strong or vulnerable are we when it comes to our cyber defenses? And what do our adversaries pinpoint as being our weak spots?
So I think the U.S. government itself is relatively strong when it comes to cybersecurity. So they have good practice in place. They have things like the FedRAMP standard to make sure all contractors are actually complying to good cybersecurity. However, where we become much weaker is our businesses, our local cities, our water supplies, our electricity. We saw Colonial Pipeline just a few years ago. And this is where the U.S. becomes really weak because while the U.S. hacking the Navy may be very difficult, hacking a oil pipeline is much more viable.
Yeah. And, you know, I think a lot of everyday Americans are seeing these headlines and the alerts from Homeland Security saying, OK, how much do I and my family need to worry about this, right? How do you answer that, especially when it comes to things like our personal finances and sensitive information?
So I think regardless to the headlines, we should be worried. We see more and more spear phishing attacks, more and more identity theft happening every single day. So American consumers should be very worried, be very vigilant about who they're giving their information to, make sure their credit reports are locked. And in cases like this, where Iran is looking to respond, you should be more worried and more vigilant. But generally, you should be worried regardless to what's on the current news cycle, because it's happening every day regardless. I think it's the U.S. cost of cybercrime is something like $320 billion without escalated tensions in Iran.
Aren't those numbers crazy? I mean, it's just wild. And I guess this is the new looming threat in wartime. You know, we often have these visions of tankers and bombers, but this is cheaper and faster, right? You know, to exact a cyber attack instead of actual warfare.
And I think the reality is countries are putting so much investment. If you look at in the Middle East, especially, there's so much investment in cyber warfare to make sure. And there's a huge concern here on the ground with the leaders here. I've spent the last week meeting with leaders in Qatar, in Bahrainian leaders, in UAE, and they're very, very concerned about cyber attacks generally across the spectrum from Iran, from Israel. Just the general cyber warfare has become such a big part of warfare.
Okay. Yeah, we will stay vigilant here at home. And it's cliche, but it's true. If you see something, say something. Danny Jenkins, thank you so much for your time this morning, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.